Let's talk about configurable entities and relationships in the DSpace-CRIS compared to DSpace. It's important to understand that configurable entities in DSpace-CRIS follow exactly the same concept of DSpace. They're just normal items with an additional metadata. The DSpace entity type that is used to define which kind of record this item represents could be a publication or a person or an organization. This is exactly the same approach used in the plain DSpace. What is the difference from a plain DSpace is the way that the relationships are managed in DSpace-CRIS. In DSpace-CRIS, we use the authority framework that assigns DSpace from managing relations between an object, an item, to an external entity or another item. So, in some metadata, such as the DC contributor holder in a publication, we can put the IUD of the person item in the authority column to track the fact that this specific name is not just a string, but is a link to another record in the repository. We only track and store the direct link. So, from the publication to the person, the relation that go from the publication to the person, the inverse relation can be always discovered performing some query at Solr level, or eventually also to the database level. Which are the great benefits that this approach will provide compared to the normal approach of plain DSpace? In a plain DSpace, the relation information are stored in a separate table than the metadata table. And each time that you retrieve an item, you are required to retrieve all of the information from the metadata table. So you're always already retrieving information from the metadata table. But in a normal DSpace, you're also required to check the relation table to verify if there are any relation between this item and other items. Moreover, this is in plain DSpace relation in metadata are two separate concepts. But indeed, relation need to be mixed with metadata. Because if you're talking about the relation of a publication with a person, you expect to have into the C contributor author of the publication, not only the author, just as a string into metadata, but also to one that has been precisely identified and linked to a person item into a repository. This means that all the time that you access an item, a publication item, you retrieve all metadata, you retrieve all the relations, and some Java logic is used to mix together the relation with the metadata. And this is computing time. Moreover, due to the way that the information is stored into the database, as soon as you need to create this relation to entity, item is created. And this could lead to a situation where an in-progress submission mentions a person item by mistake. It's a duplicate author, or the publication will be never completely deposited, but the person item will stay in the repository because it was immediately created to be able to link this person item with the publication. All of that is not needed in DSpace-CRIS, so there is no need to perform additional queries. We store all the data that we need into metadata And this means that just with the basic query that always need to be performed to check details about an item, we already have our information. We don't need to mix this information with other information. So we have saved CPU time, and we don't need to create entities until they are really needed. We only create a personal item if a publication is submitted. During the workflow, the librarian found that this personal item is really needed, so it was not a mistake, was not a duplicate. And when this publication is finally archived, the personal item is eventually created. Due to the fact that DSpace-CRIS just used metadata to store relation without the need to introduce a new concept. And most of the features that was available before the DSpace 7 work out of the box with the relation in DSpace-CRIS. And all of these features benefit of the fact that no additional queries, no additional data need to be extracted, processed to work with the relation, because metadata are always involved, not the existing feature of DSpace. Moreover, the relation feature that has been implemented in the plain DSpace has some critical issues in regard of new feature. For instance, one of the more critical issues in GitHub is related to the fact that the management of relation in the submission process has not been implemented within the submission framework. This generates an inconsistency in dealing with the relation data during the submission that led to stability of the platform and bad performances. This issue is one of the longest standing issues in DSpace. It was created before DSpace 7 and is still unsolved. This issue will be automatically solved switching to the DSpace-CRIS approach, because nothing special is needed in DSpace-CRIS to manage relation. The other aspect is about visual metadata. As I said, it's important to use information in a related item as a metadata of the linking item. Again, using our example of publication and person, it's usually needed to include metadata from the person, such as the ORCID ID, into information of the publication. When we index this information, when we expose this information over YPMH and so on, which is the approach of plain DSpace? DSpace uses a normalized database, so all the information is stored into the database in a normal way, and each time that you need to get this information, they are read from the database. This means that when you index the item in a Solr, these information are retrieved from the database to the database and stored in Solr or in DOI core, which are the benefits of this approach. This is the easier approach to implement, but it's a bad performance when you access the data, because each time that you need to get this data, you need to follow all the query into the database. You need to retrieve this information into the database. Moreover, this strategy is subject to data misalignment, because some of the components of this database make additional copy of your data, such as the Solr index and UI index. This means that if you add the ORCID ID to a person item after that this person item was linked to several publications. To have this ORCID ID indexed into per publication metadata into linked publication metadata, you will need to re-index your whole repository, and this is inefficient. How this is managed in DSpace-CRIS? The virtual metadata in DSpace-CRIS is not really virtual. They are physical metadata. They are stored aside the other normal metadata in a specific schema, all under a specific element of virtual to make them immediately identifiable, which is the main benefit. We only need to store this information when the item is linked to another item, and when the linked item changes some metadata. We need to recalculate this metadata. But having that calculated beforehand means that we can read this information very quickly in a very efficient way. So, which is the idea behind the DSpace-CRIS approach? DSpace-CRIS use of write-ons and read-many strategy, because data in the repository are usually read much more times than modified. So it is much more common that you access the metadata of a publication millions of times before that this publication changed some metadata. In any case, the number of changes is always much smaller than the number of reads. Writing is in any case optimized in DSpace-CRIS, because when you change an author, the need of recalculation of virtual metadata in the linked publication is kept minimal. So the system will check if the change into order has a real impact on the information needed at the publication level. If this is the case, this process is performed in a synchronous way, without blocking the operativity of the repository in a near real-time fashion. So also data consistency is guaranteed in DSpace-CRIS.